Good morning, church.
Good morning.
I worked overnight at the hospital. I'm a little tired. Good morning, church.
Good morning.
Ah, that's better. I hear you now. Okay, good. They say you never can go home, but here I am. So don't ever say never, because you don't know what God's going to do. I want to take a minute of personal privilege before I start preaching. I'm going to get around to my sermon, but I just got to tell you all, I love you all very much. And there's some people I want to just recognize briefly today. There's a lot of you I want to recognize, but a couple people that are special to me, and one's right here.
Amen.
I'm getting a little long in the tooth. But this woman has been in MCC longer than I have been. And if you want to know the great stories about MCC and why people like her and I have stuck around for so many years, she's got them. Talk to her, because the stories are amazing. This is the 75th birthday of Troy Perry this weekend. So our founder is 75 years old, and we're grateful to have him around. I was telling my group of chaplains that I'm going to school with, I said, when I got ready to resign from Spirit of Hope, the first phone call I got was from Troy Perry, the founder of our denomination. It's sort of like John Wesley calling up a Methodist pastor and saying, "Hey, are you okay?" That's what he asked me. That's the kind of love we have for one another in MCC. And if you're new here, you don't know me, that's good. No. If you're new here and you don't know me, I hope you've encountered some of that love when you came into this place from the people that are here, because the people here are special. And the board of directors have been working very hard. They have found out just how much work it is to run a church. Because for many years, John and I worked together to help keep that going, and now it's on you, and you've been doing a marvelous job. And all the various ministries, from tech people up there to the people that cleaned yesterday, to the people that cooked food for the homeless and the needy, you just do an amazing ministry, so keep it up. I just applaud you. I can't be back with you every week to worship yet, but when the time comes, when your new pastor's here, we'll negotiate that. And I'm grateful for this opportunity at this time, Eddie, to be here today. I'm following up Emmanuel Cleaver. Those are big shoes to fill. I recognize that. I'm not the mayor. I'm just a chaplain here in town. Some of you still call me Pastor Kurt, and that's okay. In this setting, I sort of kind of get that. You're used to seeing me here as Pastor Kurt, but I really am Chaplain Kurt now. That's my moniker. That's who I am in my heart. I love doing what I'm doing, and I'm grateful to you as a church for allowing me to go do that ministry, because it is touching lives, and I get to talk to people about the great church that you are on a frequent basis and what I learned here. So I'm grateful for all that. One of the great things I love about MCC is you all know how to eat. Right? Some great potlucks and some great meals here and some great breakfasts here. And I used to be able to say, if I had a loaf of bread, a hunk of cheese, and something to wash it all down with, I would never want for anything more. You see, I could easily go to like a food addiction place and say, "Hi, I'm Kurt. I have a bread addiction." It's very true. I mean, there's something about growing up with homemade bread and a smear of butter on it, more butter the better, as a cheap and easy snack to have. I still like to do that. Unfortunately, my doctor says, not a good idea. My mother would often make potato water bread for our Sunday meals, which was a loaf form that we sliced up, and I can almost taste those memories. In fact, it's getting hard for me to preach as I talk about this bread thing. Bread is a staple that often is part of meals throughout the world. It's not unique to Americans. It's not unique to people who live in the Western culture. It is part of cultures throughout the world. There's some form of bread of some type at all of those places. When everything else falls apart in the countries, when the police no longer come, when the armies are no longer there, when everything falls apart and the government falls apart, the first thing they look for is, where's the bread maker? The bread maker is the one that's needed to keep the people alive, and it is a way in which to provide relief throughout the country. Relief organizations rush in bread makers and bread when there's famine or war. They often take bread as the first way to get some food into people's bellies. It can fill up all those spaces that are empty, right? Bread can easily travel, especially if it's one of those hard, crusty breads. It'll last for months, right? You can bang it around, it's still there. Cut it up, you have something to eat. Bread, very simply, is flour and water, and in most cases, something to leaven it with. Something like yeast or some baking soda or something. And all you need besides that is a little bit of heat. In fact, you can make bread out in the sun if you need to, but a lot of people have just small little ovens or fires where they can cook these things. In some parts of the world, bread takes a totally different form than we are used to. You might look at that and someone would say, here's some bread, and you go, what? What's that? It's not bread, because we're used to what we have. We have these homogenized slices of white bread that have been around for, well, since Betty White was born. You know? And my mom used to make these gooey, ooey cinnamon rolls that to this day, my dad still likes to buy cinnamon rolls because he remembers Mom's gooey, ooey cinnamon rolls that she would make. Yeah. When the people of Israel are released from their slavery from Egypt, they start wandering around out in the wilderness, going from place to place, looking for their homeland, following the pillar of fire and smoke. And they go from place to place to place. But you know what? They didn't pack for 40 years. Nope. They didn't think it'd take 40 days to get to where they were going. They started heading out pretty soon. Guess what? They ran out of food. They started getting low on everything. And they started going, what are we going to do? We don't have any more food. I guess they couldn't trap anything. I guess they couldn't find food where they were at. So they were out wandering. They say to Moses, hey, you brought us out here to die. I'd rather go back there. I'd rather go back to being a slave. I'd rather go back to someone telling me when to get up and what to do and how hard to work. Because at least there I had something to put in my belly. We never have problems like that where we complain about simple things like getting something in our belly, do we? I have a coworker, a chaplain. I think I can tell this without getting in trouble. Might want to turn off the recorder for just a second. I have a chaplain friend of mine who, in my class, says she gets hangry. Anybody get hangry? Where you're hungry and angry at the same time. If you can't get something in your belly, you get hangry. These people of Egypt were hangry. They're hangry at Moses. They're likely to kill him if he doesn't do something. So what does he do? He goes, complains to God, and says, hey, God, okay, now what do? They're about to kill me if I don't give them something to eat. How will I respond? At least if they stayed in slavery, they'd have something to eat. You know, they'd rather have the bread of affliction than have the bread of freedom or to starve out there in freedom. And there's real parallels to that today, because what happens in the midst of war is that people that find that there's no future, no chance for their child, flee from where they're going, from where they've been, from all those things they know. That's why we have the current situation right now going on in Europe, is because they can't even get bread to eat where they're at. You're forced to move. You're forced to get out of there, and you're trying to get to where you want to be. So Moses takes the grumblings of the people to God and challenges God. Okay, God, what are you going to do about this? And God sends them a daily ration of bread, but only one day at a time. Except on the day before Sabbath, when they take 2 days' worth. Why? Because if you take 1 day's worth, you get all you need. But if you take 2 days' worth on any other day except the day before the Sabbath, it goes bad. Now, what kind of God do we have that has a great expiration date of 1 day on his bread? Right? Except for on Sabbath, day before Sabbath. Then you get 2 days' worth, and it stays good for those 2 days, right? God, you think about what that is, what that means to us. God knows that they need 2 days of bread before the Sabbath on the day they're going to rest. And so he sends 2 days worth, they pick up 2 days worth, they put it away, but they pick up 2 days worth any other time. They have more than they need. They'll have too much and it'll go bad. You draw the parallel to our lives here in America today. You see, we could feed the world if we really wanted to. But mostly we lack the will to do so. So now the people of Israel have daily food to eat. All they got to do is go out and collect it. It's even easier than going to the shopping mart, because all you got to do is walk out your tent, pick up a little bit in your jar. You've got plenty of food for the whole day, for the whole family. And what do? Complain. Oh, now we only have bread. I want some meat. What does Moses do? He goes back to God and says, okay, God, these people are at it again. They're going to kill me if I don't get some meat. So guess what? God sends birds to fly down right beside their camp and to sit there on the ground and tell the people, pick them up. Right? They don't fly off when they come after them. They get enough food to make food every day for themselves. And then they say, wow, at least we have food to eat, but we're not in the promised land yet. God says, keep on walking. Fast forward to the time of Jesus' ministry, and folks need to be fed again. Jesus blesses 2 loaves of fish and about 2 loaves of bread and about 5 fish, right? All these people who have gathered to hear him, more than is gathered here today, hear me, certainly. It's more like a Billy Graham crusade type of people, okay? They all need food. Out of these 2 loaves and 5 fish, everybody has plenty to eat, more than enough to fill their bellies. And when they get done, what happens? There's a whole bunch left over they got to give away that night. And then, right after this happens, what happens? The disciples say, well, when are we going to be able to do those kind of things like, make loaves appear and fishes and all that stuff? And Jesus says, you don't have to. I'm here with you at this very moment. All you got to do is believe in me and talk about what we're doing at this moment, this ministry that we're in. And they said, well, how will we know if you're the one? Were they not paying attention? He just fed them all. He fed a whole multitude. They said, we need something more than that. Show us again what God's going to do. We need miracles. And they say, Moses, he fed all those people. Jesus says, huh? I thought that was God that did all that. Moses didn't make all that bread every day. Moses didn't catch those quails every day. No. They were sent from God. You ought to get this. Jesus knows this is a teaching moment, right? We never have those in church life. This is a teaching moment here. You've witnessed all this great healing. You've witnessed people walking on water. You've witnessed me healing people from the dead and bringing them back to life. You've witnessed how a woman touches my robe and she becomes healed. What more do you need? Jesus makes the connections that things that are brought down from heaven, manna or himself, are the gifts to the people on the life of this earth. Just like the manna was the bread of life during Moses' time, today, Jesus is the bread of life for us, the disciples. Jesus says, I am the bread of life. And that should mean something to us. In our world, we hunger on a daily basis. In our community, we hunger on a daily basis. We need some hope. We need some healing. Lord knows I daily need forgiveness. And we need abundant life. And Jesus tells us he offers that to us every single day. The ration that we need. We need each of those things so that we can bring about God's divine love. Jesus referred to it as the kingdom, but I call it God's divine love in this place. In order for us to bring about that kind of understanding, we need those daily in our lives. And we find ourselves often disconnected from God and humankind, and that's usually when we say, okay, God, you got to prove it to me. I need a sign, an example, a miracle, so that I know that truly you are the one that's given me hope. Not just hope yesterday, but hope on a daily basis. I need forgiveness on a daily basis. I need abundant life on a daily basis. And I need healing on a daily basis. We complain, and Jesus says, wow, I am in your midst even today. Jesus became the bread of forgiveness. When people were weighed down by sin and the break in relationship that they had with God, Jesus offered forgiveness to them. As people would tell Jesus about their lives, Jesus found opportunities to help people see the goodness of the grace of God in all that they had encountered. He taught them about forgiveness, the understanding of what forgiveness being grace, that it was unmerited by their actions. They couldn't obtain it by being more holy than anyone else. They simply had to welcome it into their life and to believe in it. When the woman was accused of adultery and the men were ready to stone her, Jesus began writing in the sand. And by the time he was done, all those that were accusing her were gone. Jesus showed compassion on that woman and told her, you don't have to sin anymore. Your life is worth the gift of forgiveness. Jesus is the bread of forgiveness. Certainly was for that woman, has been for some of you. Jesus became the bread of hope. When there was despair, Jesus offered a view of something more, a vision of what could be. Jesus said the poor would inherit a kingdom, not the scorn of the world. Jesus said it's better for you to lose your life than to keep it for yourself. Jesus said that those who had power had much expected of them, not less. And Jesus offered hope to a bleak world. You think our world is bleak today? It was just as bad then. I look at our world today and I think that many people in our world go through life sensing that there is no hope. Their only hope they see is politicians that say terrible things about one another. The refugee crisis of today is just the beginning of people fleeing for economic and weather-related problems that will come up in the days ahead. There are days I want to just throw up my hands and say, I give up, God. I can't make a big difference on these issues. But God speaks to my heart, and my voice won't let me. It's not easy. Be assured of this, it's not popular for churches to feed the hungry or to clothe the poor. It's not popular. Because most people really don't want to be confronted with the fact that there are poor people around us, and there are people who are hungry, and there are people who don't have clothing. And Jesus told us we can't just ignore all that, although we'd like to. As disciples and churches, we must continue to toil away, because if we make a difference in one person's life, we've made a difference in this world. This church, and many of you out here today already offer that kind of hope. This church offered hope when no one else would offer it to the LGBT community, I can tell you that. And today, you still offer hope to those that need affirmation of their own self-worth and value as a child of God. We suffer from an epidemic of shame in this world. Epidemic. Shaming and blaming. And for you to say, no, everyone is worthy of God's love, is radical still today. Jesus became the bread of healing. The man beside the pool couldn't ever seem to get in the water fast enough after the angels troubled the water. You had to be the first one in the pool to get the healing. He could never make it there in time. And Jesus says to him, well, do you want to be healed? What's preventing you from being healed? Do you want that wholeness? And Jesus offers that to him and gives it to him. Jesus cast out the demons in the man with the epileptic condition. The woman who was bleeding knew if she could just touch the hem of his garment, she would find that healing in her body. Jesus is the bread of healing for those who need healed in many ways. And believe me, Jesus is in the midst of your healing, whatever it may be, however it may turn out, whatever you're faced today. Jesus is in the midst of that. And Jesus became the bread of abundant life. In community, the disciples found they had connection with one another. They found that there was a reason to exist together. In eating, people found that they had plenty to eat when they came together and pooled their resources. In sharing the joys and concerns, people found they're not alone, that people would pray for them, care for them, help them out if they could. In walking from town to town, the disciples noticed that when a town cared for other persons, when they were truly hospitable, it had plenty in their town. They had plenty. And no one really went without in a good town with hospitality. Jesus knew that when we form communities of believing, faithing people, which is what MCC is, we then can find abundant life. You see, if we don't come together, we miss out on the opportunities to give to one another and be the community of abundant life. So in the midst of the meal of the night that he was betrayed, Jesus took some of the bread. And I think he did that deliberately. because they remembered what he said. He said, I am the bread of life. And he offered it to God and blessed it and broke it and gave it to everyone there. Every week in this church you celebrate Holy Communion, but you understand there's a connection to something deeper. Jesus knew that around the world, whenever people gathered together with one another and cared about one another and broke bread together, in the midst of that, God is present. Whether it's consecrated bread or not, it doesn't matter. In the midst of their sharing, God is present. Now, we do believe that in the midst of this, God does something miraculously too. So Jesus didn't do away with the meaning of the meal of the celebration of Seder. Instead, he sees the connection back to the people of Israel, wandering in the wilderness, crying out to God, we're hungry, we're hangry, right? We're hangry. We need some gift of hope. We need the bread of hope. We need some gift of forgiveness. We need the bread of forgiveness. We need the gift of healing because we're hurting. And Jesus offers the bread of healing. We need abundant life, not just walking through this world hoping to get to the next day and maybe get to retirement and then maybe getting to whatever till we're not here. We need abundant life. And we come together and split the bread. And Jesus offers the bread of abundant life. It's amazing that we have all these expressions of God's divine nature through Jesus, the one we call the Christ. We have much we can still learn from the various breads that are offered to us by Jesus. When Jesus offers himself over to the soldiers to fulfill the scriptures, we are amazed at what all has been accomplished by that gift of grace. He offers himself sacrificially, and we are recipients of that bread. Yet today, Jesus still offers what we need from him today. Jesus hears us in our groanings and listens to our complaining, just like Israel did with Moses. God is still listening. Literally in the world, many people are starving to death. Yes, from nourishment from food, but as much from the need of hope, healing, abundant life. Jesus is still the bread of healing. Through his disciples, anointing, and prayer for persons who have been told that their health or life is in jeopardy, Jesus offers healing if we have faith. We hear how Jesus forgave the persons, including those who put him to death. And we are offered forgiveness that will allow us to be in relationship with God and each other and to choose forgiveness as much as we're willing to forgive others. Jesus is still the bread of abundant life. No longer is our life in vain. We have a direct connection with God, and we can make connections with others who want to live a life of love in relationship to their fellow humankind and to our world. Not a consumerism life, that's not abundant life, but a life of love and caring. Today we're going to celebrate Holy Communion as you do every week. It is a remembrance of when Jesus said, I am the bread of life, and also about how Jesus shared his last meal with those he cared about, the disciples. They feasted on a holy festival of remembrance that brings the story to life of Israel fleeing from slavery to freedom. We as Christians see the new life directly related to that story of what Jesus was doing, freeing us from slavery to death and separation from God. Just like the various grains and the way of making bread or flour in the meal takes place throughout the world, Jesus offers these breads to meet our needs still today. Jesus said, do this in remembrance of me. I would offer that as Christians pray before they eat, oftentimes around a dinner meal with their families. It isn't just about thanking God for having enough food, but it's also in remembrance of what God has done to lead us and meet us in our place of need when we're hangry, at our hunger, and God offers us to break bread. Amen.